play basketball for a living. Have an incredible family, incredible life. I'm not picked on. There's other people that's picked on. I'm no victim. I'm good money. I told y'all on my podcast, that's my reputation is a badge of honor. Not everybody can earn that reputation. So life goes on. I'm never going to change the way I play basketball. It's gotten me this far. It's gotten me 3 championships, 4 All-Stars, Defensive Player of the Year. Not going to change now.
I love me some Draymond Green. Jay, nor should he. Should he change, Jay? Should he change the way he plays?
First off, Draymond Green's going to be a superstar. He will be on TNT or he will be somewhere earning a lot of money. The fact that he did an instant podcast right after the game because everybody wants to hear his thoughts. I agree with him that he doesn't need to change the way he plays. But he has to change his mindset to a degree when he's in playoff games that become heated when things like that happen, right? Because, I mean, that could have led to a bigger situation. Look what happened in 2015. Now, you're already talking about guys winning multiple NBA championships. And I know that last night we had a situation in which Jay Crowder kicked Luka Doncic someplace he should not have kicked him. Draymond jumped on social media, said, oh, he should have been suspended for multiple games for that, right? Going back to what happened in 2015 when he kicked LeBron James in the family jewels and then got suspended. So, but, like, you just have to be smart in those situations. But I don't think he needs to change the ultimate sentiment of how he plays, though, Max. He just has to be smarter.
No, he doesn't need to change anything. Continue to play the way you play. You play with passion, you play with fire. Much like Draymond said, 3 championships, All-Stars, future Hall of Famer, made millions of dollars on the court, contributes to his community. The reason that he is where he is now is because he has been a relentless worker. He wasn't a first-round pick. He wasn't the number 1, the number 2, the 10th pick of the draft. He's a second-round guy who clawed and climbed his way up the ladder to become scrappy. So I don't want him to change at all. I understand what you're saying, Jay, that he needs to be mindful in certain situations, but that's not who he is.
He also
you cannot take that away from him. No, that edge that he has, because then he would not be authentic. He will be something that he's not. You lose that edge, Draymond Green will be a shell of himself, and I'm sure the Golden State Warriors and Steve Kerr and Steph Curry and Klay Thompson don't want him to change. No, they don't do exactly what you've always done.
Key, you don't have to lose your edge, but you can be – the dude is extremely mindful and extremely aware. Like, he is a basketball low-key genius. He's like a Rajon Rondo. He's the one that orchestrates a lot of their plays. I don't know if you guys have ever spent time with him, but just hearing him break down sets and what he sees as a quarterback on the court is brilliant.
I've spent time with him, but not talking about basketball.
Draymond Green is an all-time great. He should be a first-ballot Hall of Famer, in my opinion. And by the way, when everyone talks about how Steph changed the game, his crime partner, even though Klay is obviously in the backcourt with him more than anyone, is Dre. That's the pick-and-roll partner. That's the dude who allowed them to play 5 out. That's the do-everything guy, the point forward. He is a great player, future Hall of Famer. Let me say this. He obviously should not change the way he plays, but I want to get into the point you made, Jay, because I totally agree with this. The fact is, a player with Draymond's kind of personality and energy, right, has to know how to walk that line where you go right up to it, but you don't cross it for the benefit of the team. And what comes to mind, you brought up 15, or the 2016, 15-16, but it was the 16 finals, right? LeBron knew Draymond one more tech, and he was going to miss a game. LeBron baited him. He baited the hook and threw it out there. Dre bit. And because of that, the Warriors lost the championship. 73-win team. I don't think if Draymond gets suspended, if he doesn't get suspended, there's a good chance they win the series.
Jay, what year is this for him?
Did.
For Dre,
what year is this for him?
I'm not sure. He's been in the league for a while.
Teens, right?
Teens? Let me look it up.
No, but in the teens. Why would he change now? I understand what happened. I understand what happened with LeBron James and LeBron baited him and everything and all that. He ain't changing.
But that's not
so why even try to get him to do something that he's not going to do? No, that is changing. When you're asking him not to keep that edge, not to keep that scrappiness, not to push and shove or grab or kick or claw, whatever it is that you think he's doing that he shouldn't be doing, that's the
question, though,
10 years in the league.
The question is, can you retail it? In other words, like, you don't want him to make a wholesale change because that's what made him great, as you said. Is it possible to ask someone with that personality to be great, do all the things you're doing, but you're saying no, you can't ask him to just change that little thing because
he's 10 years in. It's not a year. It's not 2 years. He's not.
I think you can ask someone to be a little smarter in certain situations.
Did Dennis Rodman change? What made him great was his edge. It
Rodman
never
is
changed.
a good comparison.
Max,
It never changed.
Max.
Yep.
Would Draymond Green be a Hall of Famer if he didn't play with Steph and Clay?
Impossible to say.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think greatness. I think
this is a barbershop conversation that boys and I have
I've only
sometimes
seen him
about,
play with Steph and Clay, though, Jay.
I know, but like if he were on a team that didn't have that system with the shooters of Steph, the greatest shooter of all time, potentially the second greatest shooter of all time,
the conditions had to be right for him. In other words, yeah.
Just a thought, just a conversation.
There were other kind of wide-bodied, shorter, power forward types who could play the point, like Anthony Mason. But Draymond took it to a different level, I think. But you're right, yeah, conditions were right for him. But they were right for him. It did occur.
Agree. It is what it is. I mean, conditions are what they are. It was just sometimes as a hooper you have these type of conversations.
It's an interesting conversation, and I'm even more interested in this idea. Could he? He is saying, no, can you ask someone who's always done it a certain way and has gotten great success because of that, hey, just this one little thing over here.
Or not to be mindful and not to grab somebody's jersey or to kick somebody to be ejected.
It's
or
not,
to lose
it's
your,
not on Jay. You can't change.
Key, you have to some point, if you're yelling at a ref and you keep going, like
I think
it's not going to happen. So let's stop trying to make it happen.
I actually think Draymond can do that. I think he's smart enough to do that.
It's not whether or not he's smart.
Everyone knows people
he
in their
ain't doing
lives
it.
who, like, they are who they are, and you can't ask them to change just this little thing.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.